UFC 323, the final pay-per-view maybe of all time and for sure over the next 7 years, December 6, 2025, and as the UFC has done with the past 3 pay-per-view events, there are 2 championship bouts on this card as well, but if we look outside of those at the rest of the main card, at the prelims, we have 10 other ranked fighters competing, and there's a possibility that there are even 2 number 1 contendership bouts on this very same card, and we're going to start with one of those right here, right now to kick off the preview, and it is none other than the former champion, the assassin baby, Brandon Moreno, taking on Tatsuro Taira, Japan's biggest hope for a champion present day in the UFC. And I'm going to be completely honest, after taking a look at this fight card, thinking about what I was going to discuss on today's preview, this is the fight that I am most looking forward to from a storyline and an X's and O's perspective, to be quite frank. Don't get me wrong, it's awesome to see if Merab can make history, defend the title 4 times in 1 year, and continue to climb up the GOAT discussion for the UFC. Can Petr Yan redeem himself and become a 2-time champion? Can Pantoja continue to chase the goal of reaching Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson as the greatest flyweight of all time? And can Joshua Van become the 2nd youngest champion in UFC history? Those are all great storylines, but this fight here is a former 2-time champion versus a young, hungry up-and-comer representing all of Asia, specifically Japan right now, looking to become the first Japanese champion in the history of the company. So if there's one fight that I had to choose from this entire card to watch, it is this one, Brandon Moreno versus Tatsuro Taira. Moreno will enter this bout on a 2-fight win streak with unanimous decisions over Amir Albazi and Steve Erceg. That one was his most recent bout back in March. And if you peel back the curtain over the last 5 years since he has been in the title discussion and been the champion, his only losses are to Davison Figueiredo, former champion, Alexandre Pantoja in his title-earning performance, and he hasn't let go of that title since, and Brandon Royval in a number 1 contendership bout. And those latter 2 fights against Royval and against Pantoja, they were razor-thin, ultra-competitive split decisions. But we can't forget that he also has 2 victories over Davison Figueiredo, and those were both by way of stoppage, and he finished Kaikar France, to add on to those aforementioned 2 unanimous decision victories that he's coming in on the heels of. And somehow, someway, Brandon Moreno is still just 31 years of age. He is right in the middle of those prime years, yet he made his debut in October of 2016, over 9 years ago now. He's already been the champion twice. He's beaten some of the best names that the flyweight division has ever seen. And with all that said, it's still quite possible that we haven't even seen him reach his peak yet. He's one of the most crisp and technical boxers that we have ever seen in the flyweight division's history, yet he still has more submissions than knockouts with 11 subs and just 5 KO TKOs. And specifically over the last 5 years, when he really entered into the title discussion, became the champion, challenged for the title, so on and so forth, we've really seen the evolution of Brandon Moreno's skill set. He doesn't necessarily just rely on his striking and boxing skills, but he can get the job done anywhere that the fight goes with his offensive grappling. He can keep the fight standing when he faces grapplers, and pretty much everything in between. And he is one of the most durable fighters, not only in the flyweight division's history, but in the entire UFC's history as well, because in his 8 professional losses, he has never been finished. And while Brandon Moreno is still in his prime at 31, he does feel like an older generation when comparing him to his opponent this weekend in Tatsuro Taira, who I believe represents the next generation of not only flyweight, but all weight classes. He is the epitome of a mixed martial artist. And he is just 25 years young, but already has 18 professional fights under his belt, having finished 13 out of his 17 victories. And the only fight that he has lost was a very competitive split decision to the former title challenger, Brandon Royval. And since his debut in May of 2022, he has already fought 8 times in the Ultimate Fighting Championship, racking up a 7-1 record. And most recently, he is coming off of a 2nd-round submission win over a short-notice replacement opponent, Hyung Sung Park, back in August. And while I did mention that Tatsuro is the definition of a next-generation mixed martial artist, it is his grappling that gives him the nod against a majority of his opponents. He is so slick. The way that he can methodically get his opponents down to the mat, even keep them on the feet, but wrap up the body triangle. Just see the victory that he had against Alex Perez, where he pulled him down, causing an injury to Perez that would result in a TKO win for Tatsuro. But it wasn't just some freak TKO injury accident. It was literally because of the skills and techniques that Tatsuro Taira utilized. Now, I will say in his loss to Brandon Royval, it was the striking realm where he would fall behind quickly in that bout and never be able to catch up. So if he can't get Brandon Moreno down, it is going to be intriguing to see how he can face adversity in this 15-minute stand-up affair, not 25 like the Royval outing. And as I mentioned off the top, it's not out of the realm of possibility that this is a number one contendership bout at 125 pounds, especially when you take into account it's happening one fight before the championship in their division is being defended between Alexandre Pantoja and Joshua Van. For Moreno, it would be 3 consecutive wins in a row if he gets the nod over Taira, which is more than enough to say that he should be a number one contender. And for Tatsuro, he would improve to 8-1 in the UFC, 2 victories in a row, this one being against a former 2-time champion. He absolutely could get the nod as a title challenger as well. So while I feel pretty certain that this is a number one contendership bout, let's put it at around 75%. I'm not at a full 100 because in 1 week from this fight, in the final UFC event of 2025, in the last main event, the last fight of the entire year for the UFC, it will feature Brandon Royval versus Manel Kape in a long-awaited bout that could just as easily be labeled as a number one contendership bout as this one. So between those 4 fighters, I think it's going to come down to who has the most convincing and impactful performance that can push them above the other winner and into a title shot against either Pantoja or Van. Be sure to give me your thoughts and predictions on this flyweight featured bout down in the comments below. 1, do you think it will be Moreno making it 3 consecutive, or will it be the 25-year-old Taira making it 2 straight wins and getting the opportunity to become the first Japanese champion in UFC history? Or are you not ready to go full gas on this one being a number one contendership because you want to wait and see what happens next week between Royval and Kape? Give me all of your thoughts on the flyweight title picture down below. The next fight to discuss is one of the more oddball matchups, as it will pit the former United States Olympic gold medalist and former 2-weight UFC world champion Henry Cejudo up against the unranked up-and-coming prospect Payton Talbott. So while I said that Moreno versus Taira was kind of like an old generation versus the next generation, this is 100% what that is. Henry Cejudo at one point was one of, if not the best fighters in the entire organization, but he hasn't won a fight in over 5.5 years, dating back to May 9th of 2020, where on that night he retired for the first time, and now fast forward over 5.5 years later, he's going to retire a second time, and it seems like it's going to be for good. But sandwiched in between those 5 years was Henry Cejudo returning to action in May of 2023 after nearly 3 years away to the day, and he would lose in a title fight to Aljamain Sterling. Then he would follow that up with a loss to Merab Dvalishvili in February of 2024, who would go on in September of that year to be the champion and is now main eventing this fight card. And then in February of this year, he would lose a decision to Song Yadong that would be halted early at the end of the 3rd round due to an accidental eye poke, but enough time had went on in that 5-round bout that it went to a technical decision and Song Yadong would be awarded the victory. I'm going to be completely honest with you here. I don't know what to make of this fight and what to even expect. Because on paper it seems so simple. Payton Talbott is the large betting favorite, rightfully so. He is the much younger fighter. He has the higher ceiling at this point in both of their respective careers. Henry Cejudo hasn't won a fight in 5.5 years. He's on a 3-fight losing streak. But yet some way, somehow, I just feel like there's a way in which Cejudo could shock the world. Because regardless of the lack thereof in terms of victories for Henry over the last few years, you can't take away the opponents that he has been facing as nothing but the best in the world at each present time when he fought them. Whereas Payton Talbott has yet to face anyone even close to the top 15 in the bantamweight division, and the closest fighter that he did face to the top 15 was Raoni Barcelos, and he absolutely dominated him from pillar to post and had one of the biggest upsets of the entire year, beating Talbott via decision back in January. Now, yes, we know that Payton Talbott did bounce back in the summertime at UFC 317, but it was with a much more methodical performance rather than a star-making performance when he would earn a decision win over Felipe Lima. But Talbott is only 27 years of age, so he's not even in those prime years just yet, but he does have 11 professional bouts to his name, with only the 1 loss to Barcelos, and of his 10 victories, 8 of them have come by way of finish, with 7 of the 8 by knockout. But I just don't see a world where he comes in here and not only beats Henry Cejudo, but knocks him out, considering Henry has only been finished 1 time in his 5 losses, and that was nearly a decade ago in April of 2016, where he would be knocked out to Demetrius Johnson, the greatest flyweight we've ever seen. But the veteran Cejudo is going to be 11 years older than Talbott entering UFC 323 at 38 years of age. Like I said already, in his retirement bout, he has nothing else to prove really, but he also doesn't have anything to lose, and that's always a dangerous fighter. And I truly feel like there's not a lot in this for Payton Talbott, because if he loses, he's going to get shit on by the MMA community, saying that he lost to a washed up Henry Cejudo who hasn't won a fight in nearly 6 years. People are going to say that he just doesn't have what it takes to compete with top 15 level competition, at least at this current state in his career. But if he does get the victory against Cejudo, I don't think it will be weighted as heavily as the UFC might think, because the same exact people that would make fun of Payton Talbott for losing to Henry Cejudo are the same people that would say, well, you beat a guy that hasn't won in years. This doesn't really put you that far up the ladder. Damned if you do, damned if you don't, in my opinion, for Payton Talbott in this bout. But what do you think? Do you think Henry Cejudo can turn back the clock one more time in his retirement fight and go out with a W, or will it be Payton Talbott improving to 5-1 in the UFC? And regardless of how you weigh the fight or not, it would undoubtedly be the biggest victory of his brief UFC career so far, and will insert him into the top 15 at 135 pounds come Tuesday morning. And the second potential number one contender bout on this UFC 323 fight card will be between the former champion himself, Jan Blachowicz, and the 11th ranked light heavyweight in the world, Bogdan Guskov. Since September 26th of 2020, the night that Jan Blachowicz would defeat Dominic Reyes to become the light heavyweight champion of the world, including that fight, has fought 7 times total coming into UFC 323. 7 fights in 5 years, and he's now 42 years old. Not to mention his last win was over 3.5 years ago on May 14th of 2022. Since then, he had a draw against Magomed Ankalaev in a vacant title shot. Then he would lose a split decision to Alex Pereira in his light heavyweight debut in July of 2023. He would not fight at all in 2024, and in his first fight of 2025, he would lose a decision to Carlos Alberg, who is now potentially next up for Pereira's light heavyweight throne. In his wins over the last 5 years were against Dominic Reyes to become the champion, a title defense against Israel Adesanya moving up from middleweight, and Alexander Rakic, but that one has an asterisk next to it because Rakic would blow out his knee in that fight and it would end due to injury. So if you really want to get into the weeds, Jan Blachowicz hasn't won a fight since March 6th of 2021, his decision win over Adesanya. And the other loss that he has in this time period was to Glover Teixeira, where he would be submitted in round 2 and Glover would become a champion. So there's little to no momentum on the side of Jan Blachowicz. There's not a lot of activity on the side of Jan Blachowicz, and he is 42 years old. It's safe to say that the cards are stacked against the Polish power. But for Bogdan Guskov out of Uzbekistan, it is the complete opposite trajectory for his career right now, as he will enter this fight against the former champion on a 4-fight win streak, all 4 of them by way of stoppage. Most recently, Nikita Krylov back in July, where he knocked him out in the very first round. Before that was a submission win over Billy Elikana at UFC 311 in January. And the lone loss that he has on his 5-fight UFC record was to Volkan Oezdemir, the former title challenger, and that was his UFC debut. Bogdan is 33 years old, so 9 years younger than Jan Blachowicz. He is going to be the much quicker and much more powerful at this present day and time fighter in this bout. It's not even up for question. And the man has only seen the scorecards 1 time in 21 professional bouts, having been finished in 2 of his 3 losses, and carries a 100% finish rate with him, with 15 knockouts and 3 submissions. Now, I will say that Jan Blachowicz is a relatively durable fighter, considering he fights in the 205-pound weight class. Of his 11 pro losses, has only been finished 4 times and lost 7 times by way of decision. And I can see a path to victory for Blachowicz, even though I am siding with Guskov in terms of the momentum. If Jan gets takedowns early and often and puts Guskov on his back and doesn't allow him to throw down on the feet, Blachowicz definitely does have a method to victory in this bout. I mean, look, at the end of the day, Bogdan got submitted by Volkan Oezdemir. That's something that Volkan isn't known for. But if Guskov keeps this fight standing, he does have a chance to potentially knock out the former champion Blachowicz, make it 5 fights in a row, insert himself not only into the top 10 of the light heavyweight division, but right on the doorstep of a top 5 spot. So depending on what Guskov does, especially if he wins, we'll talk on Monday on what I feel could be next for him. But if he can do something crazy and convincing against the former champ, don't be surprised if he's next up after the Black Jag Carlos Alberg. Next, we move to the 155-pound lightweight division, where we will see the number 13 ranked lightweight in the world, Grant Dawson, taking on the dangerous fighter out of Mexico, Manuel Torres. Grant Dawson, in my opinion, is hands down one of the most overlooked and underrated fighters on the entire roster, and is the most underrated, overlooked fighter in the lightweight division. I don't even think it's close. He was an OG on Dana White Contender Series, competing in Season 1 episode 6 way back in August of 2017, and since that night when he would earn a second round submission and at the same time earn a contract to the UFC, he has done the following. He has fought 13 times, won 11 of the 13. He has had one loss, a 33-second flash knockout against Bobby Green, and had a draw against Ricky Glenn in October of 2021. 11-1-1 in the lightweight division, and yet he's only 13th in the world. Come on, man. But it might just be because he is the boogeyman of this lightweight division, and not a lot of people want to fight Grant Dawson because of the stylistic discrepancies in their skill sets. Training out of American Top Team, one of the best gyms in the entire sport, 31 years old in his prime, and one of the slickest, most top-heavy grapplers in this division right now. He is a nightmare matchup for a lot of the top 15 fighters in this weight class right now. Of his 23 victories, he's finished 18 of them with 13 submissions and 5 knockouts, and his most recent fight was a victory over the veteran Diego Ferreira back in January at UFC 311, and the other 2 victories that he has since the loss to Bobby Green was a TKO win over Rafa Garcia and a decision over Joe Selecki. So I feel like if Grant Dawson can pass another test, a dangerous long-rangey striker like Manuel Torres, he's got to be catapulted up in this division. I don't know what else the guy has to do. At that point, he would be 12-1-1 in the company. But if anyone can put a halt to the rise of Grant Dawson, it may just be El Loco Manuel Torres, who has an 88% takedown defense, is 30 years old, right in his prime in his own right, and has finished 15 out of his 16 victories with 8 knockouts and 7 submissions. His only loss in the UFC since debuting back in May of 2022 was against Ignacio Bahamondes in a 4-minute and 2-second barn burner before he would get knocked out at Noche UFC. But he has since bounced back from that knockout loss with a knockout victory over the Iron Chin Drew Dober back in March, and now he will look to go 2-0 in this comeback year. And that loss to Bahamondes is the only loss that he has suffered over the last 5 years, dating back to March of 2020. He has gone 7-1, with all 7 of those victories coming by way of stoppage. I think in this fight, we're going to see a very convincing victory, no matter who that is. If it is Grant Dawson, I think that means that he was successful in getting Torres down to the ground and he stops him down on the mat. And if it's Torres that comes out as the victor on Sunday morning, then it will be because he was able to stuff the takedowns of Grant Dawson and he knocked him out in the stand-up realm. I look for this fight to be violent, I look for it to be exciting, and I look for the winner to catapult themselves near the top 10 of the lightweight division. Next, we move to the women's flyweight division in a fight that is not going to get the respect that it deserves, but it will feature the number 5 ranked Maycee Barber and the 9th ranked Karine Silva, a very pivotal top 10 matchup considering the title in this weight class just got defended at UFC 322, considering that Alexa Grasso was supposed to take on Rose Namajunas in January. She had to be pulled from the bout. In steps Natalia Silva against Rose Namajunas. And at UFC 322, the same night that Valentina Shevchenko remained the champion by defeating Zhang Weili, we saw Erin Blanchfield get a submission win over Tracy Cortez. Oh, and I can't forget to mention that it was just a few short months ago where Manon Fiorot bounced back from her loss to Valentina Shevchenko, and she did so by knocking out Jasmine Jasdavicius, who's on a massive win streak heading into that bout. This women's flyweight division is cooking right now. But unfortunately, what will inevitably overshadow the importance of this fight is the storyline surrounding Maycee Barber in the current state of her career. She has only fought one time over the course of 2024 and 2025, and that came back in March of last year at UFC 299, where she would get a decision win over the former title challenger Caitlin Sermonara. Since then, Maycee Barber has had to withdraw from bouts, she has had to go through numerous injuries and illnesses, and even back in May was scheduled to have a main event against Erin Blanchfield in what would have been a number 1 contendership fight, and quite literally minutes before the fight was scheduled to happen and she was supposed to walk out and make her entrance to the cage, she had to pull herself out of the bout. And Maycee Barber is only 27 years old, so there's a couple of different ways that you go through all of the crap that she has been going through over the last 2 years. From a pro-sided perspective, she is only 27. She is still 2 or 3 years away from entering her fighting prime, so at least she's getting all of this drama out of the way now. But the cons could be believe that so much has already happened to her at such a young age into her career that she may not ever be able to reach her full potential. What side of the coin do you fall on? Let me know down below. But I'll tell you this right now, if Maycee Barber isn't 100% ready, both physically and mentally, she will not beat Karine Silva at UFC 323. The killer Karine Silva is 32 years old, right in her prime with a 19-5 record, and she has finished 17 out of those 19 victories and is 5-1 in the UFC since debuting back in June of 2022, with the only loss coming by way of decision to Viviane Araújo, a longtime ranked flyweight fighter. That loss came back at UFC 309 in November of 2024, but Silva has bounced back in 2025 with a decision win over Dione Barbosa, and now she will get the biggest opportunity of her career against the biggest name fighter that she has fought so far in Maycee Barber, and if she gets a victory, she will insert herself into the flyweight top 5 for the first time and will then just be one more win away from title contention. We've seen very big glimpses of potential in both of these fighters throughout their brief UFC careers so far. I talked about the finishing rate of Silva, and Maycee Barber has been known to show some real killer instinct as well in her career, and some of it not even that long ago when she had that blood and guts war against Amanda Ribas where she would eventually earn the knockout in that fight. And one thing to note for Barber is that she has never been finished in her career. Both of her losses are by way of decision, so that may cause some fits and problems as the fight goes on against Silva, who is going to be looking for that finish. If Maycee Barber is at 100% health, I think that she can get a victory here and maybe even a convincing win at that. But if she is not, like I already said, Karine Silva will win this fight. And our last ranked fighter on the card is none other than the 14th ranked middleweight Marvin Vettori. That sounds kind of crazy to say that he's ranked all the way down at 14, but here we are. The former title challenger is still just 32 years old, so right in those prime years, and I think it's not too late for him to have a big comeback, but things have not looked great for the Italian Dream recently. He has lost 4 of his last 5 bouts dating back to September of 2022, and if you peel it back even further, he's lost 5 of his last 7 since competing against Israel Adesanya in their rematch, and in that second fight, it was for the championship back in June of 2021. Adesanya would earn the decision there, and since then, it's been real tough sledding for Vettori. And as a matter of fact, he will actually enter this fight against the unranked Bruno Ferreira, the Hawk, on a 3-fight skid, losing to Jared Cannonier in June of 2023, losing to Roman Dolidze in March, and losing to Brendan Allen in July. But yet somehow, this does just feel like a big step back for Marvin. I mean, look at the names that I just talked about, the fighters that he has been fighting, but now it's Bruno Ferreira. And while Bruno doesn't carry the name value that those other fighters Marvin has fought do, he is a very dangerous, dare I say, lethal fighter with a 100% finish rate, 9 knockouts, 5 submissions, and has been finished in both of his losses. This man doesn't know what a decision is, whereas Marvin Vettori, he knows all too well. Marvin has never been finished in his career despite having 9 losses to his name, and hasn't earned a finish victory in his own right since June of 2020. So how does a seemingly immovable object in Marvin Vettori, one of the most durable fighters in middleweight history, pair up with an unstoppable force in Bruno Ferreira who has a 100% finish rate? Well, I have no idea. Give me your predictions down below. Also on this card, we have T-Rex Terrence McKinney taking on Chris Duncan out of Scotland. That fight is a guaranteed banger. Don't blink because it could be over like that. We've got the return of Jalen Turner. After retiring earlier on in the year, he has decided to make a comeback, and he is taking on Edson Barboza, the longtime veteran coming back to lightweight. And one of the bigger prospects in the UFC right now, regardless of weight class, Mansour Abdul Malik, he is on the card in the second fight of the night against Antonio Tricoli. That one is going to be violent. So that is it for the UFC 323 breakdown, and I want to get all of your thoughts, all of your predictions, and everything in between down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new, because we are on the road to reaching 1,000 subscribers. Hopefully we can get that milestone completed before the end of the year. Any and all support would be insanely appreciated. You can also join the discussion on social media at Verbal Spar MMA on X, Instagram, and TikTok, as well as like the Facebook page Verbal Sparring MMA, and you can follow on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple, where every Monday and Friday podcast episodes release there. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the final pay-per-view of 2025 and maybe ever, and I will see you all in the next video.